Caroline Myers thought she had found the love of her life in a charming British financier named Andrew Bennett, until her dream romance turned into a nightmare of lies, betrayal, and a deadly international scam that left her buried in a foreign land. Caroline Myers had always believed in second chances. After a painful divorce that left her emotionally drained and financially cautious, she was determined to find balance again. Living alone in her sleek Miami condo, she spent her evenings walking by the beach, sipping wine on the balcony, and convincing herself that loneliness was better than betrayal. But one night, as she scrolled through a luxury travel site, a stranger's message stopped her heart. His name was Andrew Bennett, British, elegant, educated, a man who seemed at first glance too perfect to be real. Their conversations began innocently, talks about London's rainy charm, art, wine, travel, but quickly deepened into something more personal. He listened like no one else had. He noticed things. When she mentioned her favorite candle scent in passing, he remembered and sent a package the next week with that exact lavender blend. It felt like fate, or maybe destiny finally correcting itself. Andrew made her laugh again, blush again, dream again. He told her she was brilliant, beautiful, wasted in a city that didn't deserve her. They met 2 weeks later in Miami. Caroline was nervous, dressed in her best navy dress, her heart pounding as she waited outside the hotel. But when she saw him, tall, clean-shaven, dressed in a pale blue tailored suit with piercing green eyes and a smile that disarmed, every doubt melted. He wasn't just charming, he was captivating. That first dinner turned into a weekend together, and then that weekend stretched into weeks. Andrew didn't just romance her, he studied her. He knew when to be bold, when to be soft, when to hold her close, and when to give her space. It was terrifying how much she wanted to believe in him. He told her he was in Miami to open a financial consultancy branch, said he handled portfolios for the wealthy, mostly old-money clients from Europe. His accent, his calm confidence, and his impeccable manners painted the picture of someone who belonged in an expensive world, a world Caroline wanted to touch. At first, she kept her guard up. But when he offered to help her restructure her savings into smarter international investments, she didn't hesitate. She wanted to believe this was real. She needed to. Her friends raised eyebrows. One of them even joked, "He's too good to be true." Caroline smiled, but something cold lingered in her chest that night. A flicker of fear? Or just old scars whispering again? Andrew soon moved in. He was attentive but mysterious. She never saw his laptop open. His phone was always face down. But he made excuses that sounded reasonable. "Confidential client data," he'd say with a soft kiss. She told herself not to be paranoid. He was kind, he cared, he was changing her life. And when he suggested they invest together in a property in London, a city full of promise and fresh beginnings, she said yes. Not knowing she'd just handed over more than her money, she'd given him her trust, and he would use it to destroy her. Caroline stepped off the plane at Heathrow, clutching Andrew's hand, her heart fluttering with a strange mix of excitement and unease. The air in London was colder than she expected, damp and heavy, but he pulled her close and whispered that this was the beginning of everything. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. After all, she'd left behind everything, her home, her job, her safety net, for this man and his promises. She had told herself it was brave. She told herself it was love. The flat in Kensington was modern, small, and smelled faintly of old paint and wood polish. It wasn't the luxury townhouse he'd described when they planned the move. But Andrew was quick with an explanation. "Temporary, darling, just a stop while the lawyers finalize the property transfer," he said, placing his leather briefcase beside the sofa. She nodded, too tired to argue, but something inside her stirred. Why wasn't her name on any documents yet? Days turned into weeks, and Andrew was always busy. Meetings, phone calls, whispered conversations behind closed doors. Caroline tried to remain patient. She wandered through London's winding streets. Alone, often lost in the crowds of strangers. She'd taken a leap across the ocean, yet somehow felt more isolated than ever. The man who had once hung on her every word was now distracted, absent, distant. She told herself it was stress, business, cultural adjustment, but the pit in her stomach grew heavier. One night she asked about the money, nearly $600,000 she'd wired into an account Andrew provided. He smiled and kissed her forehead. "Don't worry, love. Everything's handled. You'll see the paperwork soon." But soon never came. When she asked again, his mood shifted. His eyes hardened. He became cold for a moment, just long enough for her to feel the chill. Then he softened again, brushing her cheek and telling her not to ruin a good thing with suspicion. She couldn't sleep that night. She stared at the ceiling, the silence of the flat pressing down on her like a weight. Her mind replayed every warning from friends back home, every little inconsistency in Andrew's stories. Why hadn't she listened? Why had she been so quick to trust? She got up and opened her laptop, trying to log into her bank account. The password had been changed. Her hands trembled as she tried again and again. The screen stared back at her, blank and locked. The next morning, Andrew acted as if nothing had happened. He handed her a latte, told her he loved her, and asked if she'd like to go shopping. She stared at him, watching every move, every blink, every gesture. He seemed so calm, so controlled. He was wearing her down without raising his voice, and that frightened her more than anything. She smiled weakly, nodded, and took the coffee. But inside, something cracked. Her dream of a new life in London was collapsing, and she was too afraid to admit it aloud. Caroline sat on the cold windowsill of the Birmingham townhouse, staring out at the gray sky that matched the haze in her chest. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet, rows of nearly identical brick homes, all silent behind drawn curtains. It felt like a forgotten street, a place people passed through but never noticed. Andrew had moved them here a week ago, unannounced, insisting it was safer, more private, temporary. But nothing about it felt temporary, or the move happened overnight. He packed their belongings in rushed silence, told her there was a security issue with the Kensington property. She asked questions, but they dissolved under his dismissive tone and clipped responses. He booked the car, drove in silence, and avoided eye contact the entire journey. Caroline tried to convince herself he was just being protective, but her gut told her something else. He was hiding. Now in this unfamiliar house, her days blurred. There were no visitors, no neighbors, no phone. Andrew had taken it under the pretense of upgrading it for a better UK SIM. Her laptop disappeared days earlier. Her passport, which she usually kept in her purse, was now in a safe place, according to him. Everything she owned, everything that tethered her to her identity was gone. He came and went like a shadow. When he was there, he was charming, but his charm was different now, measured, laced with control. When she asked about their money, he'd grow still, then softly tell her she didn't trust him enough. He said it like a wound she'd inflicted. Guilt became his weapon, and it worked. She would fall silent, ashamed, wondering if she really had lost faith too soon. But at night, fear crawled into her. She wasn't just isolated. She was erased. She'd sent emails to friends, but received no replies. Were they even reaching them? She wrote a letter and walked 3 blocks to a postbox, only to find it sealed. No phone, no ID, no bank access, no car, no key to the front door. She was a guest in her own life, and not even a welcome one. That's when she made the decision to hire a private investigator. She still had one secret debit card stashed in the lining of an old handbag, something she'd forgotten about herself until desperation drove her to search. Using the public library's internet terminal under a fake name, she sent a message to a US-based investigator recommended in an old email thread. It was a risk, but she had no choice. She needed to know who Andrew really was. The report came 3 days later, brief, brutal, and soul-crushing. Andrew Bennett didn't exist. His real name was Daniel Marks. He had a criminal history stretching back years: fraud, identity theft, manipulation. He had done this before to other women in other countries. Caroline sat in the dim kitchen, clutching the printed report, her breath shaking. The man she had loved, trusted, followed across the ocean, was a liar built from fragments of stolen lives. And she was trapped. And she was next. In Miami, the sun still glinted off the waves like it always had. But for those who knew Caroline Myers, something felt wrong. Her phone calls had stopped. Her social media went silent. Her best friend, Lila, noticed first. At first, she brushed it off. Maybe Caroline was just caught up in the whirlwind of her new life. London, new love, big changes. But weeks passed, and not a single message came, not even a heart emoji. Nothing. Lila tried calling, no answer. Emails bounced back. The worry started small, like a faint itch in the back of her mind. But it grew fast, devouring reason. Caroline wasn't the type to disappear. She loved checking in. She loved staying connected. Her mother, Ruth, grew frantic. She hadn't heard her daughter's voice in almost a month. Caroline never went more than 3 days without calling her. Ruth contacted the U.S. Embassy in London. They opened a file, but with no exact address, no formal report from UK authorities, there wasn't much they could do. Andrew, if that was even his name, had made sure to keep Caroline hidden in every possible way. No paper trail, no tenancy in her name, no bank accounts she could access. Even her emails, it turned out, were being monitored. What Caroline didn't know was that Andrew had taken control of her digital life too. He crafted replies to the few friends who reached out. Short, vague, cheerful messages. "Having the time of my life. So happy. Don't worry about me." It was enough to delay their panic. He mimicked her voice in writing. He knew just what emojis she would have used, what phrases she'd repeat. It bought him time he used to siphon her remaining funds through fake businesses, foreign accounts and layered shell companies. The numbers were falling fast, 6 digits gone in a matter of days. Meanwhile, Caroline was slowly being erased from the world she once ruled. Her reflection had changed. Her skin looked pale, stretched too tightly across her face. Her eyes, once bright with confidence, had grown wary. She was barely eating. She lived by the sound of the door locking behind him each morning and unlocking each night. Every creak in the floorboards made her flinch. Every silence felt like it might break into violence. She thought about escaping. She even planned it once. Waited until he left, stuffed what little cash she had in her coat pocket, and tried to open the door, but it was bolted from the outside. That night he returned with flowers and takeout, acting as if nothing had changed. His smile never reached his eyes anymore. Across the ocean, Caroline's mother paced her Florida living room, tears welling up every time her daughter's voicemail picked up. Her voice was still there, frozen in time. "Hi, it's Caroline. Leave a message and I'll get back to you soon." But soon had come and gone, and no one realized Caroline wasn't just missing, she was vanishing, piece by piece, like a name being whispered into the wind. The wind swept over the empty moorland like a sigh, low and endless, whispering secrets no one had meant to hear. It was early spring in the Peak District. Still cold, still quiet, still lonely. A pair of hikers, trying to escape the noise of the world, stumbled across something that shattered the silence forever. Just beyond a row of twisted trees, they noticed a patch of disturbed earth. At first it looked like nothing, maybe the work of animals or erosion, but something about it felt wrong, too neat, too shallow. When authorities arrived and began to dig, the truth emerged like a horror unburied. Beneath the soil, wrapped in layers of silk and decay, lay a woman's body. The scent of perfume still clung faintly to the fabric, as if memory itself refused to let her go. The body was too decomposed to recognize immediately, but they found a handbag tucked beneath her arm, faded pink leather, the initials CM barely visible under the dirt. Inside were a few melted cosmetics, a U.S. driver's license, and a note, one page torn from a notebook, stained with water and time. The ink had run, but a few words remained legible. "If you find this, I try." Caroline Myers had been found, but she was no longer alive. News of the discovery reached Miami within hours. Her mother collapsed to the floor. Her best friend screamed into the phone. For months they had clung to hope, even as that hope grew quieter. But now the uncertainty had become something much worse, certainty heavy and final. The coroner's report revealed chilling details. Caroline had not died quickly. She had been poisoned over time, small doses, enough to weaken her, to confuse her. Her body bore signs of malnutrition. Her fingernails were cracked, her bones more fragile than they should have been. She had suffered, quietly, without anyone to hear her cry. Investigators retraced every possible lead. Caroline's bank records painted a disturbing picture. Tens of thousands siphoned through fraudulent companies, registered in Cyprus, Panama, and the British Virgin Islands. There were forged signatures, offshore accounts, and countless transactions disguised as consulting fees. But all of it led back to one name, or rather one man with many names. Andrew Bennett, Daniel Marks, James Caldwell. The list went on. He was gone. Disappeared. The townhouse in Birmingham was empty. No fingerprints, no DNA, only silence and shadows. Neighbors said they never saw Caroline. Some didn't even know anyone lived there. He had vanished with the precision of someone who had done this before. But now, there was a body, there was proof, there was murder. Caroline's story dominated headlines in both the UK and US. American woman found in British grave. Romance scam turns deadly, from love to horror. Strangers mourned her. But mourning brought no justice. Not yet. All her dreams, her warmth, her laughter, all of it now lay beneath a gray sky, in a quiet field, far from home. Her final moments, spent with a man she once thought was her future. She had given him her trust. He repaid her with a grave. The lights of Manhattan shimmered against the glass towers as the city pulsed with its usual rhythm, people rushing, laughing, building futures. In the middle of it all, a luxury tech conference buzzed with innovation and ambition. Venture capitalists and CEOs mingled in suits, sipping cocktails, talking blockchain and artificial intelligence. But one man stood out, not because he wanted to, but because someone recognized what he was trying to hide. He wore a new name tag, James Caldwell, investment advisor. His suit was crisp, his accent still perfectly British, and his hair now speckled with gray. To most, he looked like every other polished businessman in the room, but to former FBI agent Natalie Brooks, he looked like a ghost from a case that had haunted her for years. Natalie had read every report about Caroline Myers, the American woman who vanished for months before being found in a shallow grave halfway across the world. She'd seen the photos, studied the interviews, and memorized the face of the man who had slipped through international borders like smoke. And now he stood less than 20 feet away, sipping champagne, laughing, lying. Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she doubted herself. Could it really be him? He looked older, leaner, but those eyes, cold, calculating, hadn't changed. She pretended not to look directly at him, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. Her fingers typed fast. Within minutes, quiet calls were made. Plainclothes officers slipped into the crowd like whispers. She didn't let him out of her sight. He moved like a man without fear, full of confidence, built on years of deception. He wasn't just blending in, he was thriving. In the weeks before his capture, James Caldwell had been dating a wealthy widow in Connecticut. Her friends adored him. He had charmed his way into her business affairs, even gained access to her private accounts. It had all been happening again. Another cycle, another woman, another life stolen in slow motion. When the officers approached him, he didn't resist. He simply smiled, like it was a misunderstanding, like he'd seen this before. He didn't ask what the charges were. He already knew. The extradition to the UK was swift. In court, his mask cracked only once. When Caroline's mother took the stand, she held up her daughter's picture, her voice shaking but clear. She spoke of the phone calls that stopped, the birthday that passed without a card, the Christmas dinner with an empty chair. She described the moment she learned her daughter had been buried like a secret, far from the people who loved her most. He said nothing, not a flicker of regret, not a word of apology. He was convicted of fraud, theft, and murder. A lifetime sentence followed, but for many it wasn't enough. Caroline's life had been priceless, and no punishment could bring her back. Still, something had shifted. Her story had traveled across continents, exposed invisible crimes, and saved others from falling into the same trap. Caroline had been silenced in life, but in death she spoke louder than ever. And this time, he didn't disappear. He was seen, he was caught, he was finally stopped.